Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this Monday night, January 23rd in-depth ag forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. I want to start off today by just getting right on into the big storm system that we're watching coming out of Arizona and New Mexico here on Monday evening. It will very quickly eject tomorrow, getting on Tuesday right through parts of Texas and Oklahoma, and will continue into the Ohio River Valley here. This is what we call an Ark-La-Tex low. We'll talk more about that in a few seconds. So winter storm warnings are posted. We'll also get a good look at the newest updates on the total snowfall amounts for this system and how it's all going to actually kind of gather here in New England. This system and the ones that follow it, delivering quite a bit of heavy snow into parts of New England. On the southern side of this shaded color you see right in through here is all high wind advisory, and there's even high wind warnings down into parts of Louisiana. And this is also an area we're going to be watching for some severe storms out of this. Still some cool air tucked away in the Central Valley of California. There's a few other places where we do have frost and freeze risk, as we're kind of identifying here pretty far to the south. But a lot of our attention is going to go to this system right here. So oftentimes when I'm doing these videos, I talk about short waves. And what I'm talking about here is cyclonic flow, which is counterclockwise in the northern hemisphere. And this short wave is deep in the atmosphere. It's an upper atmosphere feature. And what it does is it just causes divergence, air to essentially evacuate from an area, and therefore it gets filled in from below. Air rises and produces clouds and precipitation. That's just a very basic kind of idea behind this. Well, you can see that cyclonic spin right in through here, and that system, as it kind of pulls on through as the sun was setting this evening, is really beginning to take shape into New Mexico, where the snow is going to fall first. Now, speaking about snow, you can see, if I go back throughout the day today, just the extent of the snow that's on the ground here. And I want to talk more about that in just a few moments. But first, the precipitation, where it will begin tonight into tomorrow, is going to hit an area that not only over the last 30 days, but some places going back 60 plus days, has been extremely dry. So the first bit of moisture coming into this part of New Mexico, it's going to be in the form of snow, then cutting across the panhandle toward the Red River Valley of the south. This is going to be an area that's really going to start to fill in. To the south of this, we're going to be talking a lot about storms at this point. So this is our map again, looking at the last 30 days, percent of normal precipitation. I'll be looking forward to getting the update of this map tomorrow. We'll see some of the effect of some of the recent rain over here across the Carolinas as well from this past weekend system. But overall, this is kind of the setup that's going to be kind of, well, reshaping a map that looks like this. This is another map that's going to change, and I hope this map is clear. What I've got here is I've made a map that shows percent of normal snowfall, and I'm using the 2008 to 2022 average, and this was through this morning. Now, when you look at it, there's a lot of overlaid numbers, and I can kind of zoom in to give you some perspective here. So, for example, you notice that throughout the Sierra Nevada mountains, looking at year-to-date percent of normal, we're in that 200 to 300%, and then through the interior of the Great Basin and through here, some places almost up to 500%. Out here where the most recent big snowfall events went, including the one that hit at the end of last week, that came into parts of Colorado and Kansas, some of the first moisture return here in a while, has now got these areas at well above their climatological averages. We've been discussing quite a bit what this means for the upper Colorado Basin, which is currently on average at about 140% of normal snowpack, and what it also has meant for the western United States. But you can start to see some of the holes that are in here as well. Some places that need to kind of start getting some snow, they're pretty far behind, including a lot of New England and a big section here of the Midwest. So I made another map, and this one here is accumulated snowfall departure. So now the number represents difference from normal in inches rather than percent. And again, we can go right into the west. Let's blow it up again. And you see some places like this one location here is 134 inches more than normal. And you can see a lot of places in here in that 20 to 40 inches above average, including this stripe right in through this area here between 20 and 30 inches. But there are some places, for example, where the snow is going to come out and run like this, where we expect to see quite a bit more snowfall accumulating and really picking things up here in New England. So hopefully this map is intuitive. I know it's a bit busy here, but it's some of the kind of broader perspective on what's going on with this pattern. Now, I called this a few moments ago an Ark-La-Tex low, and I want to take you to that spin in the atmosphere. So this is what it looks like to an atmospheric scientist. This is vorticity. And just a reminder is whenever we take regions of positive vorticity and move them to a region that either has lower positive vorticity or even negative vorticity, you're going to have rising motion. So the fact that this wave, which has already got a tilt on it in this direction, is going to dig through West Texas means that always on the leading edge of it, remember the flow is from the west, so it's coming in like this, that's where we're going to have our best rising motion. So this means that the short wave, by the time we get into tomorrow night, will be just south of the Red River Valley, meaning the best upward motion is here, and that's where the low is going to be. So we're always going to watch the front edge of this to see where the system's going to track. And you can see it goes right through the Ohio River Valley and eventually into the eastern Great Lakes. Following it, we have this broad trough. And we need to see what that means in terms of delivering some snowfall and colder weather as well. And that's already going to be set up by Thursday of this week into the weekend. So let's take a look at a few different pieces of this system. This is going to be one of the more challenging severe weather forecasts I've seen in a long time. The Storm Prediction Center has identified this area along the Gulf Coast where we've got an enhanced risk of severe storms. The wind shear profile is amazing. It's off the charts. If you wanted to see a tornado, it's the perfect wind shear profile for it. The issue is the low-level temperature field. We're isothermal for the lowest almost 3/4 of a mile up in the atmosphere, and therefore all the instability is above that. Now, if the temperatures really peak here early in the day, then we have a better chance at seeing a deeper draw on the instability and therefore bigger storms. And so right now, the National Weather Service is warning this area that there's at least a 10% probability of having a tornado within 25 miles of any given point. And that would be an EF2 or stronger. So I just want to be aware of what's happening along our Gulf Coast in terms of the severe weather. But there's a lot of cold air north of it, keeping the severe weather extent farther to the south. So let's go take a look at it. So this is today's 18Z NAM. And you can start to see that by midnight on Tuesday morning, the snow spreading into parts of, out of New Mexico toward Texas and into Oklahoma. Now to the south of that, very heavy rainfall along this main frontal squall line here. And this will push through eastern Texas. And this is what sets up tomorrow night the risk of those strong to severe storms under that high wind shear profile. You'll notice that on the leading edge, there will start off with enough warm air to give rain, but then as the colder air comes in behind it, we get a switch over to snow. So that includes as this pushes over into tomorrow night near St. Louis and then eventually into Illinois, but there's a broad shield of snow behind this system. It then goes fully right here into the central corn belt, hitting from Missouri and Illinois into Indiana. And it would appear at this point, I'll kind of draw this out, that this corridor right in through here has the best chance at seeing the heaviest snows, including Indianapolis, going through Effingham, south of St. Louis as an example, and then over here towards central Ohio. Now that's not the only event going on, okay? You can see scattered snow showers in the northern plains. You can see the snow showers in New England. There's even some light snow that's coming through parts of Montana all the way down the Front Range here. But this system will eventually, by Wednesday morning, getting in Wednesday afternoon, toward Wednesday evening, all the way to early Thursday morning, clear New England. And behind it, we're going to see scattered snow showers across a broad area here in the central United States and east. So that is our first system. Let's pin down some numbers on it. This is a graphic from the WPC, the Weather Prediction Center out of NOAA, and you're looking at the probability, find the color bar over here, of getting at least 4 inches of snow. So we're kind of following that track, and this is the probability of getting 4 inches and then very heavy snow into the interior of New England, parts of Quebec and Ontario, right in through here. Let's take this and step it up to the probability of 8 inches of snow. And now we can start to see there is a corridor right in through here that could pick up 6 to 8 inches of snow. At least the probabilities at some places here are above 50%. And also as you get into the interior of New England plus southern Ontario and Quebec. So this just kind of gives us some guidelines on this snow. We might as well step it up to a foot just to see that the heaviest amounts are likely going to be in this area. But again, we're just going to watch this corridor pretty carefully here for the risk of getting above 6 inches of snow. Let's now go here and look at some actual model data. I'm going to first take you to the this afternoon's National Digital Forecast Database forecast. Okay, so this comes straight from NOAA, and these are the amounts that they are currently projecting. Okay, from here I would like to take you over toward the northeast as well, and you can now see that again in the interior there's a pretty good chance of better than 10 to 12 inches in certain places. The big question is, do we get snow in the I-95 corridor here and it appears that most of it's going to stay to the west of that location. I want to switch models and show you the European. So this is today's 12Z run, and I'll just take you out here. Let's go and look at a 5-day forecast. In total, that should get this entire system out there. And again, the European model, this is where it's putting down some of the heaviest snow band. Again, that's a large area of 2 to 5 inches of snow right in through this area, with some embedded areas picking up over 6 inches. That's what we're seeing. We can then come to the Midwest, and again, we'll kind of continue this extension, and a lot of the models are honing in around Indianapolis as potentially being an area where that gets the best snow banding on the northern side of this as the system pivots. It's a really neat thing to watch on radar, but that's one area we'll keep an eye on. And then into New England, this again is a 5-day forecast. So we start to see the 10 to 15 inch amounts into parts of Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine out of this. So feel free to pause the video at any time and take a close look at those pieces. Now where the flow goes after this is still a bit disjointed. So here comes the Pacific jet. We're still split, right? And the subtropical jet takes over and runs up along the East Coast. And just to keep this kind of simple, this means that the flow is likely just going to drive systems to follow this track. I mean, that's just going to be the storm track for the foreseeable future. So we look out there over the next 10 days, and today's 12Z European model shows the split in the west as being drier, shows the trough driving down here, possibly pushing in some upslope flow, including a little clipper we need to talk about. And then again, we'll see systems doing this and systems doing that, and a pretty good pull on the moisture out of the Gulf of Mexico, resulting in above average rainfall for a lot of the south and southeast. So overall, we would look at this and see we're going to be putting some precip into some places that do very much need it. And we're still looking at another 8 to 10 days of drier weather into California. And unfortunately, the Pacific Northwest is missing out on a lot of this flow as well. And this is an area that needs quite a bit more snow. But there's a clipper coming through the Canadian prairie, and we need to just kind of distill it all down by doing our multimodel analysis here. So I just decided to pick this back up tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. on Tuesday. Good model agreement on this system. So this is out there to all the way through Tuesday night into Wednesday morning, Wednesday afternoon and evening, and then playing this out here to Thursday morning. And then you're going to see behind it a lot of scattered snow showers on Thursday midday. Now at this point, there is a short wave. You know what we're talking about. We say that it's going to move out of Alberta into Saskatchewan. It's in both models, and it's going to spread some light snow. But you notice there is a bit of a green showing up in the European. There's actually some mild air coming in with this system. I'll show it to you in a few moments, meaning this could be a very cold rain with some snow on the northern and eastern side of it. That's a very unique look for the system. But that little clipper dives into the Great Lakes. It's in both models. And after that, the flow really starts to push down out of the Canadian prairie. And this is important because what's pushing this snow into Montana is this large high pressure cell. And that large high pressure cell is going to be critical for next week's temperature pattern. Because as it dives down, it's in both models, just like this. It's actually going to set things up such that there's this ridge just off the coast that's going to feed in the moisture. We're going to watch this area for thunderstorms with a snow band on the northern side of it. You can see it better here in the GFS. Both models have the system, and as we see this play into New England, the GFS is faster, European's a bit slower, and the other feature that the European model's picking up on, look in California. Out there next Monday into Tuesday, there is a wave moving down the west coast in the European model that we need to keep an eye on. But beyond that, the flow really wants to anchor around a deeper trough here. So that means we're going to push the strongest jet stream winds around like this, which is why most of the models for week 2 keep this part of the country very wet going forward. Show you more on that in just a few moments. So I wanted to add up the total precip just so you can kind of see what some of these numbers look like. So here's system number 1. There's the clipper coming through. And we'll go ahead and take this all the way out there. I'll stop it out here next Tuesday midday. So we can see that there'll be a substantial part from central Texas through the lower Mississippi River Valley into the southeast that has easily capable of picking up over 2 inches of total precipitation. I'm very glad that there's already some snow down here and here because this is an area that's drier with this pattern. And we do have the clipper that's rolling through here farther to the north to deliver some precipitation. But take a look at this. I took you out there to day 10, February 2nd. This is actually Groundhog Day. And there's some interesting setup happening in the pattern. That split flow that was here seems to have backed off. And we're starting to see just more, I would actually just call this a bit more zonal flow coming in the atmosphere into the west, diving around this broad trough that's anchored here and running between it and the subtropical ridge, keeping the flow very fast in this region. And so if you look at that particular pattern, this does mean quite a bit of cold air for central North America. But this also means more activity, systems rolling through on that zonal pattern. So what I mean is, if you notice, okay, there's still a jet retraction, but the split flow signal, watch right in that circle, begins to go away as we start February. And this whole setup here seems to just flow across the Pacific. It's weaker in through here, but really picks up pace as we kind of orbit this trough that's going to be sitting in this area. And that's the subtropical component of the jet that's aiding in this. But what that all means is this is returning better moisture into California to week 2. The models have large spread, but near average precipitation for a big section of the country, but wetter down here at the base of that trough. And you say, why wetter there? Well, remember, the flow is doing that. There's a subtropical ridge here, so that's where the flow is going to be fastest, supporting more rising motion. So we're really watching that particular area. Now, before we see what this looks like going through the rest of February, even into March and beyond, I got to step back and just take a quick look at the temperatures. So on Tuesday, the 24th, here's a quick look at the high temperatures compared to normal. We've got enough cold air down here and to get that snow, by the way. This is now Wednesday, getting into Thursday. Now, remember that clipper system that came through? Remember I showed you had a little bit of rain out ahead of it? That's simply because the temperatures in through here are quite mild. It's a lot of downslope flow that's going to help with some of that, some warm air advection. But that area, Friday is the last day for this quote-unquote mild winter weather, because from Friday into Saturday, the trough arrives, the deep pool of cold air starts to come in, and now all of a sudden we see our high temperatures struggling to get out of the single digits in the western plains and in the upper Midwest, possibly throughout Minnesota, temperatures down there below zero. How long does that last? Well, here's our 5-day sliding window. And you can see the colder air, there it is, showing up at the end of the month, and then it's going to stay established here. Now, I've got a lot of concerns about this colder air, so I'm just going to park this out here on the 5 days ending on Groundhog Day, because we see temperatures in Montana, Wyoming, getting into the central plains here in the northern plains, averaging 15 to 20 degrees Fahrenheit colder than normal. And this is a very important time for spring calving for cow-calf operations here in parts of Montana. So this is some very untimely, very cold air. But you see that the south, southeast, and even east coast is the last holdout for the warm air due to that subtropical ridge. And it may start to fade there once we get fully into the first week of February. And we actually see the models wanting to take this broad trough, leave it in place, including dropping the temperatures off in the eastern Great Lakes over to New England. And we've seen lately how warm, how mild things have been. So this is a pretty substantial pattern change. The wild card as we get into February, as we've been discussing, is what the polar vortex looks like right now. So we have, this elongated, stretched out vortex here and a very strong anticyclone sitting here, deep in the stratosphere. And that has really pushed and distorted the shape of the polar vortex. Right now, just to compare it to a year ago, the strength of those zonal winds there have dropped off well below the climatological average. You can see it here. And the polar vortex, which just made this move, or will be making this move in the forecast, did this a year ago, went to record strength. So this will be interesting to see what this means for the month of February in terms of the potential for a substantial connection here, delivering some very cold Arctic air at some point. And a lot of that Arctic air has been on the other side of the planet over in like Siberia. So we're going to have to think a bit about that and where that is going to be moving around to. So from there, I would like to take you here and just have a quick look at what the new February 7th to March 7th outlook looks like from the European model. So this was just released. They filled this area back in with quite a bit of above normal, at least risk for above normal precipitation. And they've even expanded what's going on here in the Pacific Northwest. If there's a drier area, it looks like it could be Southern California into Arizona, Arizona and New Mexico coming into parts of western Texas. This does make sense given what's currently going on with La Niña, what's going on with the MJO, what's going on with atmospheric momentum, and the potential for some more zonal flow to show back up. But I also say that it's probably got the temperature pattern overall right as well. I see February going into March as a net overall cooler pattern more often than warmer for much of the lower 48 and Canadian prairie. Doesn't mean there won't be warm days in there, but it certainly seems that this pattern is more conducive to this. So let's go from there and take it out even farther. Some of the new data just released for February, March, and April from the CPC continues to suggest that if there's an area that has drier risk, it's going to be in the western high plains getting into New Mexico and Arizona. But there's a lot of consensus in the models that the MidSouth, Tennessee Valley, Ohio Valley, Mid-Mississippi River Valley, plus parts of the interior of the Pacific Northwest continue to run the risk of late winter, early spring, very wet conditions. So this starts to become a problem when we want to get a crop established for next year for, especially what that soil moisture looks like going into April. So we'll keep a close eye on that. Again, one of the reasons why I'm tending to buy this is because of some of the changes in the behavior of the atmosphere. One of my friends, Victor Cassini, up at Northern Illinois University, maintains this great page looking at atmospheric angular momentum and looking at the global wind oscillation. And what I want to show you is down in this figure here. You see why I'm tending to lean more toward the accuracy of this precipitation forecast from the European model. Okay, more of a wet signal across the country is because right now we've kind of bottomed out in atmospheric momentum, and it appears to be kind of picking back up. This means better total flow in the jet stream circumnavigating the northern hemisphere. There's another component to this as well, and it has a lot to do with the combination of La Niña and the MJO. So right now we are still seeing very strong trade winds in this area. And we do have a little bit of a westerly wind coming up, but this means a lot of rising motion in phases like 3, 4, and 5 of the MJO. That's here, here, and here. We are still watching this La Niña back off and lose some of its intensity near South America, which has been kind of a constant theme. But those trade winds, just take a look at this. This is today through February 2nd. Remember, these blues in through here represent strong winds going in this direction. We start to see some of the westerly wind bursts, that's the red color, show back up. So a lot of rising motion right into this area. It's going to start off in phase 3. In phase 3, let me just show it to you. Phase 3, if you look here where the MJO currently is, we might get about, 7 to 10 days of phase 3 before it moves toward Indonesia and Australia. And why this is important is, historically, phase 3 does favor some ridging over the Aleutian Islands, but deeper troughs of colder air over western North America. That sets up an active pattern. If you fuel this with a subtropical ridge, these systems have to make the turn, and therefore it just sets us up with quite a bit of activity. This is a very active and a cold pattern for February for much of North America, with the exception of probably the very southern part of the southeast. All right. Now from here, I want to talk about still more about what we're seeing with this La Niña. New data just released here from Columbia University using the CPC guidance, and they've now really have established an 80 to 90% chance in late winter and early spring of losing La Niña and going fully into INSO-neutral conditions. And the latest data also suggests that by June, July, August, or July, August, September, we're now looking at a 55 to maybe 58% chance of having El Nino develop. Now, just to be clear here, I wouldn't think of this necessarily as like a 50-50 coin flip. We need to compare it to historical numbers, which is why they put this other red line on here. Going into any year on average, there's about a 25% chance of an El Nino developing. So we're about double that. So there's just more confidence building that maybe by late summer and early fall, we're talking about the development of an El Nino event. Lastly, I just want to show you a couple things going on internationally. What's really changed a lot on this map over the last couple of weeks is the dislodging, there we go, of the very cold air over much of Siberia. It's moved east, and it's started to become displaced more over the polar regions and showing up again over the next 10 days throughout much of central North America. And why I think this is important is that we've had some brutally cold air there. It's kind of crazy to think that one of my favorite cities to watch the weather in Yakutsk, Russia, which is north of the Arctic Circle or near the Arctic Circle, but brutally cold winters. They're currently at minus 61, okay? They were 20 degrees colder than this 10 to 15 days ago. So that cold air is starting to move around, and that's why I'm concerned about those February temperatures at times. But over the next 10 days, right where that MJO is going to push all that rising motion, things are very wet throughout Indonesia. They're wet throughout Western Australia, Northern Territory here. So this is going to be quite important for Australia. Looking elsewhere around the world, dry in southern China compared to normal, dry in Western Europe, but quite wet in Eastern Europe. We've talked about the United States, but where we need to finish this is with a discussion down here about Brazil and Argentina. So let's do that and wrap this up. I showed this in my morning report, but I want to illustrate again what we saw here. Very heavy rains, locally heavy rains throughout parts of Argentina. This is an area that has been, of course, as we've been discussing, deep in drought. I mentioned I would tonight verify with some of the station data so you can get yourself oriented. Here's Buenos Aires, Cordoba, Santa Fe. If we just come in here and take a look at a few of these stations, I don't know, we'll pick this one right here. And once it uploads, there we go, we can see that this particular location just here in the last few days has picked up together about 30 millimeters of rainfall. So that's more than an inch of rainfall. We can kind of start to skip around. Let's go up a little farther. Let's go up closer to Santa Fe. When we click on this station here, we can see that the recent rainfall event over the last few days, while we still have a major deficit, it did put down 40, almost 50 millimeters of rainfall. So again, that's almost 2 inches of precipitation. And many of these other locations have shown really good recent precipitation. So we're just trying to verify with the rain gauges what we saw. Now, the bigger picture moving forward looks something like this. Over the next 10 days, we still expect in northern Argentina, parts of central Argentina, above normal rainfall. We're still quite wet in eastern and central Brazil, from Mato Grosso do Sul to the northern part of Paraná, Sao Paulo, getting into Goiás and Bahia. Near normal precipitation in Mato Grosso as well. So overall, we would look at this map and say net benefit to South America. Could this improve some of the conditions rating and total crop coming out of Argentina? It could, but a lot of damage was done to that earlier crop, which is not going to be able to be rectified by these recent rains. But let's talk about harvest progress and then planting progress. We're going to go right to the big state here of Mato Grosso, where about 30% of soybeans and corn are grown in South America. So the IMEA website, we're going to go down here. We're going to check on the harvest progress of soybeans. And once we click on this, we'll get the newest report, which came out last Friday. And we'll see here that in Mato Grosso, once this pulls up here, we're currently at almost 6% harvested on soybeans. Last year, we were at 13%, 13.3. Normal is 9. So we're a little bit behind the 5-year average and last year's pace. And if we switch this back over to corn, I don't want harvest though. Let's try this again. Let's go to the corn planting for Mato Grosso. This would be the safrinha crop. We see here that we're pretty slow compared to the past 5 years. About 5% below that pace and about 7% below the pace set a year ago. So this needs to be watched. It's interesting. I don't know why it's slower than normal. I wonder if somebody who watches my video down there can tell me. I would have expected it to be faster, but this is just some of the latest data that we've got coming out of Brazil. So I'm going to stop here and hope you all have a good rest of your week. We'll talk to you again with the next report tomorrow morning. And until then, have a good one. Thanks.